The morning sun cast long shadows across the ruins of New Geneva Elementary School. Captain Sarah Chen stood among the twisted metal and shattered concrete, her combat boots crunching on debris that had once been a playground where children laughed and played. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of rescue drones still searching for survivors they would never find. 3 days had passed since the attack. 3 days since the alien vessel had descended from the clear blue sky and unleashed hell upon the most innocent of humanity's children. The death toll stood at 2,417. All children between the ages of 5 and 12. All defenseless. All murdered in cold blood. Sarah's jaw clenched as she reviewed the security footage on her tablet for the 100th time. The alien ship had been sleek, silver, and completely unknown to Earth's databases. It had bypassed every defense system as if they were made of paper, but that wasn't what made her blood boil. What made her hands shake with barely contained rage was the deliberate nature of the attack. The aliens had targeted schools. Only schools. 17 of them across 3 continents, all struck simultaneously. They had ignored military installations, government buildings, and strategic infrastructure. They had come specifically for the children, and when their work was done, they had simply vanished back into the void of space. Captain Chen? Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez approached cautiously, his young face pale and haunted. He had been one of the first responders, and Sarah could see the trauma written in every line of his expression. "We've received word from command. The analysis is complete." Sarah turned to face him, her dark eyes hard as steel. "Tell me." "The weapon signatures are unlike anything in our records. Energy-based, but with a precision that suggests advanced targeting systems. They didn't just want to kill, ma'am. They wanted to make sure no child survived." Rodriguez swallowed hard. The medical teams confirmed that every single casualty was between the ages of 5 and 12. Not one adult was harmed. Not one teenager. Just the little ones. The tablet cracked in Sarah's grip. Around them, other soldiers and investigators moved through the wreckage like ghosts, their movements mechanical and hollow. Everyone felt it, the weight of humanity's greatest failure. They had promised to protect these children, and they had failed spectacularly. "There's more, Captain," Rodriguez continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "The xenobiology team has identified the attackers. They're called the Zephyrians from the Kepler 442 system. We've been in contact with them for almost 2 years. Sarah's head snapped up. "Contact? What kind of contact?" "Diplomatic. Trade negotiations. Cultural exchanges." Rodriguez's voice turned bitter. "Ambassador Lara was scheduled to visit Earth next month for the signing of a mutual cooperation treaty. She's been living on the orbital station for the past 6 months, working closely with our diplomatic corps." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't a random attack by an unknown enemy. This was betrayal by someone they had trusted. Someone who had been welcomed into humanity's confidence. Someone who had used that trust to learn about human society, human weaknesses, and human vulnerabilities. "Where is she now?" Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. "Still on the station. The Security Council has placed her under protective custody while they investigate." Rodriguez paused, then added, "Captain, there's something else. The attack patterns, the timing, the coordination required. This wasn't a rogue operation. This came from the top of their command structure." Sarah closed her eyes and felt the weight of every parent's grief pressing down on her shoulders. Across the globe, mothers and fathers were identifying their children's bodies. Siblings were asking why their brothers and sisters weren't coming home. Grandparents were burying the next generation of their families. She opened her eyes and looked up at the sky, where Earth's orbital defense stations hung like silent sentinels that had proven utterly useless. Somewhere up there, the creature responsible for this massacre was sipping alien tea and probably congratulating herself on a mission well executed. "Rodriguez, get me a secure line to Admiral Harrison." "Full encryption?" "Yes, ma'am." "May I ask what you're planning?" Sarah turned back to the ruins, her gaze settling on a small pink backpack half buried under a collapsed wall. It had probably belonged to a little girl who would never grow up, never fall in love, never have children of her own. That backpack represented not just one death, but the death of infinite possibility. "I'm going to remind our dear Ambassador Lara that humanity has some very specific ideas about justice, and that we've never been particularly good at forgiveness when it comes to the murder of children." The wind picked up, scattering dust and ash across the devastated playground. In the distance, a siren wailed, though there was no emergency left to respond to. The emergency had already happened, and now came the reckoning. Sarah walked toward her transport, her mind already working through the logistics of what needed to happen next. The Security Council would want investigations, committees, diplomatic solutions. They would want to understand why this had happened, to negotiate, to find a peaceful resolution. But Sarah had seen too many small bodies pulled from the rubble. She had heard too many parents screaming in anguish. She had watched rescue workers break down in tears as they realized there would be no miracle survivors. Peace was off the table. Understanding was irrelevant. The only thing that mattered now was making sure that Ambassador Zalara understood exactly what it meant to cross humanity's most sacred line. As her transport lifted off, Sarah took one last look at the destruction below. The aliens had wanted to send a message by targeting Earth's children. They had succeeded, but they had also awakened something in humanity that they clearly didn't understand. They were about to learn that some species, when pushed too far, didn't just fight back. They fought to annihilate, completely and utterly, with prejudice, with purpose, and with the kind of cold, calculating fury that could reshape the galaxy itself. The hunt was about to begin. The orbital station Luna Prime hung in Earth's shadow like a steel and glass monument to human ambition. Built over 15 years and housing nearly 50,000 souls, it served as humanity's gateway to the stars and the meeting place for interstellar diplomacy. Today, it felt more like a prison. Admiral David Harrison stood in the observation deck, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath him. From this distance, the planet looked peaceful, unmarked by the tragedy that had unfolded on its surface. But David knew better. He had seen the reports, watched the footage, and felt the collective rage of an entire species building like pressure in a volcano ready to explode. Behind him, the station hummed with nervous energy. Word of the attack had spread quickly, and now every human on board moved, with the controlled tension of people trying not to. Think about the fact that the creature, responsible for murdering their children, was living. Just a few corridors away, Admiral, Commander Jessica Vance entered the observation deck, her usually immaculate uniform wrinkled from sleepless nights. The diplomatic wing is secured. Ambassador Zalara is in her quarters under full guard. She's been asking to speak with you. David turned from the viewport, his weathered face showing every one of his 63 years. 3 decades of military service had prepared him for many things, but not for this. Not for the systematic slaughter of innocents by someone they had welcomed as a friend. What's the mood like down there? Ugly, Jessica replied bluntly. The security teams are professionals, but they're human. They all have families on Earth. Captain Morrison had to be relieved of duty after he was caught with his sidearm outside the ambassador's quarters. Said he was going to finish the job properly. David nodded grimly. Morrison was a good soldier, a level-headed man with 20 years of service. If he was ready to commit murder, then the situation was even worse than David had thought. Any word from the Zephyrian fleet? That's the strange part, sir. Nothing. Complete radio silence since the attack. Their ships are still holding position at the edge of the system, but they're not responding to any communications. It's like they're waiting for something. David moved to the central holographic display, bringing up a tactical overview of Earth's local space. 7 Zephyrian vessels held position just beyond Mars' orbit, their elegant curves and biomechanical designs looking deceptively peaceful against the starfield. They had arrived 2 months ago as part of the diplomatic mission, and until 3 days ago, they had been considered honored guests. Pull up the timeline again, David ordered. The hologram shifted, showing a chronological breakdown of the attack. At exactly 14:30 Greenwich Mean Time, 17 Zephyrian vessels had emerged from hyperspace simultaneously at 17 different points around Earth. They had struck their targets with surgical precision, spent exactly 14 minutes in atmosphere, and then vanished as quickly as they had appeared. Sir, Jessica said quietly, the attack ships weren't part of the diplomatic fleet. These are completely different vessels. Our xenobiology teams confirm the energy signatures match, but the ship designs are military grade. Purpose-built for exactly this kind of operation. So this wasn't a spontaneous decision, David mused. This was planned, coordinated, and executed with military precision. The question is whether our dear ambassador was part of the plan from the beginning. The door chimed and Captain Sarah Chen entered the observation deck. David had requested her presence specifically. Chen was known for her analytical mind and her ability to see through diplomatic double-talk. She was also known for her protective instincts when it came to civilians, especially children. "Captain Chen, thank you for coming. I assume you've reviewed the full file?" Sarah's expression was stone. "Every word, Admiral, including Ambassador Zaylara's cultural reports from the past 6 months. She spent a lot of time studying human society, human psychology, and human family structures. She paid particular attention to our educational systems and child-rearing practices. Your assessment? She was gathering intelligence. Everything she needed to know to make this attack as devastating as possible." Sarah's voice carried the controlled fury of a professional soldier holding herself in check. "She studied us like lab rats, learned our weaknesses, and then used that knowledge to hurt us in the most effective way possible." David felt a cold certainty settling in his chest. The evidence was overwhelming, but he needed to hear it from the source. "I want to speak with her." "Sir," Jessica interjected, "the Security Council has specifically ordered that no contact be made until their investigation is complete. They want her transferred to Earth for formal questioning." "The Security Council isn't here," David replied coldly. "They didn't watch children's bodies being pulled from the rubble. They don't have to maintain order on a station where 50,000 humans are calling for an alien's blood." He turned to Sarah. "Captain, you're with me. Commander Vance, maintain security protocols but stay outside the room. I want this conversation to feel intimate." The diplomatic quarters were located in the most secure section of the station, surrounded by multiple layers of security checkpoints and armed guards. As they moved through the corridors, David noticed how the crew members they passed fell silent, their eyes following the two officers with a mixture of hope and bloodthirst. Ambassador Zaylara's quarters were luxurious by station standards, designed to make visiting dignitaries feel welcome and honored. The irony wasn't lost on David as he considered how that hospitality had been repaid. The door slid open to reveal a figure that had once represented hope for peaceful cooperation between species. Zaylara stood with her back to them, gazing out of her viewport at the earth below. She was tall and elegant, her movements fluid and graceful, her skin a pale blue that shifted slightly in the artificial light. She had seemed almost ethereal during their first meetings, beautiful in an alien way that spoke of advanced evolution and refined culture. Now, knowing what those graceful hands had helped orchestrate, David saw only a predator wearing the mask of civilization. "Admiral Harrison," she said without turning around, her voice carrying the melodic tones that had once made their conversations pleasant. "I have been expecting you. I assume you have questions." "A few," David replied, his voice deadly calm. "Starting with why you murdered our children." Zaylara finally turned to face them, and David was struck by the complete absence of remorse in her large, dark eyes. There was no guilt, no sorrow, no recognition that she had done anything wrong. If anything, she looked satisfied. "Your children," she repeated as if testing the words. "Such a primitive concept. You cling to your offspring as if they were precious treasures instead of recognizing them for what they truly are." Sarah stepped forward, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm. "And what's that?" Zaylara smiled, and for the first time David saw the predator beneath the diplomatic mask fully revealed. "Competition." The word hung in the air like a poison gas, filling the diplomatic quarters with a toxicity that made breathing difficult. Admiral Harrison felt his carefully maintained composure crack as the full implications of Zaylara's statement settled into his mind. "Competition," he repeated slowly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You murdered 2,000 children because you saw them as competition." Zaylara moved with that characteristic fluid grace to a chair, settling herself as if they were discussing trade agreements rather than genocide. Her alien features remained serene, almost pleased, as if she were finally able to speak freely after months of diplomatic pretense. "You humans have such a limited understanding of galactic realities," she began, her melodic voice taking on a lecturing tone. "Your species is young, aggressive, and rapidly expanding. In the mere 2 centuries since you achieved spaceflight, you have colonized 17 systems and show no signs of slowing down." Captain Chen's hand tightened on her sidearm. "So you decided to slow us down by murdering children?" "I decided to eliminate the future of your species before it became a threat to mine." Zaylara's dark eyes fixed on Sarah with the cold calculation of a chess master explaining a winning strategy. "You see, Captain, We Zephyrians have existed for over 50,000 of your years. We have watched species rise and fall, expand and contract, live and die. We have learned to recognize certain patterns. Admiral Harrison forced himself to remain still, though every instinct screamed at him to wrap his hands around the alien's throat. What patterns? Humanity exhibits all the characteristics of what we call a consumer species: rapid reproduction, aggressive expansion, technological advancement that outpaces wisdom, and an unfortunate tendency to view resources as infinite. Zaylara stood and moved to the viewport, gazing down at Earth with what might have been pity. Left unchecked, your kind will strip entire systems bare within generations. That's not your decision to make, Sarah said through gritted teeth. Isn't it? Zaylara turned back to them, and for the first time her composure cracked slightly, revealing something cold and ancient beneath. My people controlled 47 systems when humanity was still discovering fire. Today we control 12. Do you know why? The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Because we failed to act decisively when other young species began their expansion. We tried diplomacy, cooperation, shared resources. We were civilized. The last word dripped with contempt. And one by one those species consumed everything we had built, everything we had preserved. Now they are dust and their civilizations are forgotten, but the damage was done. Admiral Harrison felt pieces of a horrifying puzzle clicking into place. How many times have you done this? How many species have you eliminated before they became a threat? Zaylara completed the question with clinical detachment. 17 over the past 10,000 years. It's not murder, Admiral. It's gardening. Pruning back the species that would otherwise choke out everything else in the galaxy. The casual tone with which she discussed genocide made Sarah's blood run cold. You're talking about entire civilizations. I'm talking about galactic stability. Your species is particularly dangerous because of your emotional attachment to your offspring. Most intelligent species produce large numbers of young and expect significant losses to predation and natural selection. But humans, Zaylara paused as if savoring the observation, humans invest enormous resources in individual children. You form powerful emotional bonds that override rational decision-making. You studied us, Harrison said, understanding flooding through him like ice water. The cultural exchanges, the diplomatic visits, the academic research. You were looking for the most effective way to break us. Of course, a frontal assault on human military forces would be costly and inefficient. But target the children and the entire species goes into shock. Parents abandon their duties to grieve. Military personnel become unreliable. Political leaders make emotional rather than strategic decisions. Zaylara smiled with genuine admiration for her own cleverness. One targeted strike accomplishes more than years of conventional warfare. Sarah took a step forward, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. You're wrong about one thing. Humans don't break when you hurt our children. We become something much worse. And what is that, Captain? Monsters. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Admiral Harrison had seen that look in Sarah's eyes before, during the border conflicts with the Centauri colonies. It was the expression of someone who had moved beyond anger into something far more dangerous. Cold, calculating fury with a purpose. Zaylara, however, seemed unimpressed. Monsters, perhaps, but broken monsters. Your emotional responses make you predictable. Even now I can see the rage consuming both of you. It will cloud your judgment, compromise your strategic thinking, and ultimately lead to your species' defeat. You think you know us, Harrison said quietly. You think 6 months of observation and cultural reports gave you insight into what humanity really is. But you made one critical error in your analysis. And what is that? You studied us during peacetime. You observed humans at their most civilized, most restrained, most controlled. You saw our diplomats and academics and artists. Harrison's smile was as cold as the void between stars. You never saw us at war. For the first time since the conversation began, something like uncertainty flickered across Zaylara's features. The children you murdered, Sarah continued, her voice carrying the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. They weren't just individuals. They were the future of our species, our hope, our reason for existing. And you didn't just kill them. You made us watch. You made their parents identify their bodies. You traumatized an entire species. As intended, Zaylara replied, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. You wanted to break us, Harrison said. But instead you've done something that hasn't happened in human history since the Solidarity Wars. You've united every nation, every faction, every political party on Earth behind a single purpose, which is, Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond, making sure you understand exactly what happens when someone hurts our children. Through the viewport, Earth continued its slow rotation, looking peaceful and serene. But Admiral Harrison knew that appearance was deceiving. Down on that planet, in conference rooms and war councils, in research laboratories and military installations, humanity was preparing for something it had never attempted before, the complete and utter annihilation of another species. Zaylara had wanted to prune the galaxy's garden. She was about to discover that she had chosen the wrong gardener. The Zephyrian fleet, Harrison said casually, still holding position beyond Mars orbit. Waiting for your signal, I assume. They are prepared to complete the mission if necessary. Good, Sarah said. We'll need them close for what comes next. The alien's confidence finally cracked completely. What comes next? Admiral Harrison turned toward the door, then paused. You wanted to study human nature, Ambassador. Consider this your final lesson. You're about to learn the difference between humans at peace and humans at war. And more importantly, you're going to discover what humanity is capable of when we stop playing by civilized rules. As they left the diplomatic quarters, Harrison could feel Zaylara's eyes following them. And for the first time since her arrival, the alien predator looked like what she truly was, prey. The war room beneath Geneva buzzed with an energy that Admiral Harrison had never witnessed in 30 years of military service. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat around a massive holographic display, their usual political differences forgotten in the face of a threat that transcended borders, ideologies, and ancient grudges. For the first time in human history, the entire species spoke with one voice. Project Prometheus is operational, announced Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead researcher from the Advanced Weapons Division. Her usually calm demeanor was replaced by an intensity that made everyone in the room lean forward. We've successfully weaponized quantum entanglement on a scale never before attempted. General Chen Wei, Sarah's father and the most decorated military strategist of his generation, stood beside the hologram showing Earth's defensive grid. Explain it in terms the politicians can understand. Dr. Elena manipulated the display, showing a three-dimensional model of space around Earth. Imagine being able to target any point in the galaxy with perfect precision, instantaneously, regardless of distance or obstacles. The Zephyrian stealth technology, their shields, their faster-than-light capabilities, none of it matters when the attack originates from quantum space itself. President Sarah Williams of the North American Federation, a woman who had once advocated for complete nuclear disarmament, leaned forward with predatory interest. What kind of yield are we talking about? Selective destruction ranging from surgical strikes to complete stellar annihilation, Elena replied without hesitation. We can remove a single individual from existence or collapse an entire star system into a black hole. The choice is ours. The room fell silent except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of construction. Above them, humanity's entire industrial capacity had been mobilized in the 72 hours since the attack. Factories that once produced consumer goods now manufactured weapons of unprecedented destructive power. Scientists who had spent their careers exploring peaceful applications of technology now worked around the clock to perfect instruments of annihilation. How long? Asked Prime Minister James Fletcher of the European Coalition, his aristocratic accent unable to hide the savage satisfaction in his voice. 6 hours for the first deployment. 48 hours for full galactic coverage. Elena's smile was the expression of a woman who had solved humanity's greatest challenge. We've also completed integration with Project Oracle. Admiral Harrison knew about Oracle, though few others in the room did. It was humanity's most classified intelligence operation, a quantum surveillance network capable of monitoring any civilization in the galaxy in real time. For 2 years they had been watching the Zephyrians, learning about their society, their weaknesses, their fears. Show them, Harrison ordered. The holographic display shifted to show the Zephyrian homeworld, a blue-green planet orbiting a binary star system 800 light-years from Earth. Cities sprawled across continents in perfect geometric patterns, their architecture flowing and organic like living things. Ships moved between orbital platforms with graceful efficiency. Population approximately 12 billion, Elena narrated with clinical detachment. 47 major population centers, 36 industrial complexes, over 200 agricultural zones. Their entire civilization spans 5 systems with a total population of 68 billion individuals. Including how many children? The question came from Minister Yuki Tanaka of the Pacific Alliance, a grandmother who had lost 3 grandchildren in the Tokyo attack. Elena's expression hardened. Unknown. Zephyrian cultural reports indicate they reproduce differently than humans. Mass spawning events every few decades with millions of offspring competing for survival. Natural selection eliminates approximately 90% before maturity. So they don't love their children the way we do, observed President Dmitry Volkov of the Eurasian Republic. His scarred hands clasped tightly before him. No, Harrison confirmed, which is why they couldn't understand what targeting our children would unleash. They thought they were performing a surgical strike. Instead, they awakened something they've never encountered before. General, Chen manipulated the display to show the 7 Zephyrian ships still holding position beyond Mars. Our quantum surveillance shows they're receiving constant updates from their homeworld. They know we're preparing something, but their technology can't detect quantum-based weapons. They're flying blind. Good, said President Williams. What about the other species they've pruned over the centuries? Elena brought up a new display showing 16 different star systems, all bearing the scars of systematic destruction. Dead worlds, shattered moons, the remnants of civilizations that had been eliminated before they could become threats to Zephyrian dominance. 17 species completely eradicated, billions upon billions of individuals who never had a chance to reach their potential. Elena's voice carried the weight of cosmic injustice, each one targeted at their most vulnerable moment, when they were just beginning to expand beyond their home systems. The galaxy has been living under tyranny for 10,000 years, Minister Tanaka observed quietly, and nobody fought back because nobody survived long enough to build the necessary weapons. Until now, Harrison said. Humanity is the first species to develop quantum warfare capabilities, before expanding beyond our local system. We're the first target they've chosen who was actually capable of fighting back. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. The Zephyrians had attacked Earth precisely because they saw humanity as a threat to galactic stability. In doing so, they had created the very thing they feared most, a species with both the capability and the motivation to eliminate them completely. There's more, Elena continued. Our analysis of Zephyrian society reveals they've become completely dependent on their position as galactic arbiters. Their entire culture is built around the concept of managing lesser species. If that paradigm collapses, their civilization collapses with it, General Chen finished. They're not warriors. They're gardeners who've never had to face anything that could fight back. President Williams stood and walked to the display showing the Zephyrian fleet. Options? We could demand their immediate surrender and withdrawal, suggested Minister Fletcher. Show them our capabilities and force them to submit. Inadequate, replied President Volkov coldly. They murdered our children. Surrender is not sufficient, agreed, said Minister Tanaka. Justice requires consequence. But what kind of consequence fits the systematic murder of innocents? The room fell silent as every leader contemplated the same terrible arithmetic. 2,417 human children dead. 68 billion Zephyrians alive. Admiral Harrison had spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with this question. Military doctrine, international law, human morality, none of it provided clear guidance for responding to species-level genocide. The Zephyrians had placed themselves outside the normal rules of civilized behavior. They had appointed themselves judges, juries, and executioners for the entire galaxy. There is another option, he said quietly. All eyes turned to him. We don't just eliminate the Zephyrians, we eliminate the entire paradigm they represent. We make it clear to every species in the galaxy that the age of Zephyrian dominance is over, that any civilization which targets civilians, especially children, will face total annihilation. A galactic police force? President Williams asked. A galactic immune system, Harrison corrected, with humanity as the antibody designed to eliminate threats to innocent life. Elena pulled up projections showing the quantum weapons network at full operational capacity. Lines of force crisscrossed the galaxy, connecting every system to Earth's command centers. It was a God's eye view of creation, with humanity holding the power of life and death over entire civilizations. We would become what the Zephyrians are now, General Chen observed, the arbiters of galactic survival. No, Sarah Williams said firmly. We would become something better, something they never were, protectors instead of predators. The vote was unanimous. Project Prometheus would proceed to full deployment. The Zephyrian civilization would be given one opportunity to surrender completely and face judgment for their crimes. If they refused, they would join the 17 species they had eliminated over the millennia. But this time there would be witnesses. This time the galaxy would see what happened when someone hurt humanity's children. As the meeting adjourned and the leaders dispersed to oversee the final preparations, Admiral Harrison remained behind, staring at the display showing Earth's children playing in parks and schools that would never again be safe while the Zephyrians existed. The age of innocence was over. The age of human supremacy was about to begin. Ambassador Zaylara had wanted to prune the galaxy's garden. She was about to discover that she had chosen the wrong species to cross. Humanity didn't just tend gardens, they burned them to the ground and planted something entirely new. The quantum communications array aboard Luna Prime hummed with power, as Admiral Harrison prepared to address not just the Zephyrian fleet, but the entire galaxy. Project Oracle had identified over 300 spacefaring civilizations within broadcast range, and every one of them would witness what happened when humanity's children were threatened. Captain Sarah Chen stood beside him in the communications center, her dress uniform bearing a new insignia that had been designed just hours before. A stylized Earth surrounded by protective barriers, with the words "Never Again" inscribed beneath in 17 different languages. It was humanity's promise to itself and its warning to the galaxy. "All stations report ready," announced Commander Vance from her position at the tactical console. "Quantum weapons are locked onto every Zephyrian asset in this system and their home systems. Surveillance drones have confirmed civilian evacuations are complete on all targeted worlds." Harrison nodded grimly. Even in their fury, humanity had insisted on giving non-combatant Zephyrians a chance to survive. The children were gone, moved to refugee camps on remote moons. Only military installations, government facilities, and the adult population directly responsible for the genocide would face judgment. It was a mercy the Zephyrians had never shown their own victims. "Open the channel," Harrison ordered. The view screen flickered to life, showing the elegant bridge of the Zephyrian flagship. Admiral Kethavara appeared, her blue skin pale with what might have been fear or fury. Behind her, the rest of the Zephyrian command crew moved with the nervous energy of predators who had suddenly realized they were surrounded. "Admiral Harrison," Kethavara said, her melodic voice carrying none of the arrogance that had characterized Ambassador Zaylara. "We have been monitoring your military preparations. Surely you understand that any aggressive action against our vessels will result in the complete annihilation of your species." "Really?" Harrison's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "Let me show you something interesting." The display split to show feeds from quantum surveillance drones positioned throughout Zephyrian space. Their homeworld rotated slowly, its cities gleaming in the light of twin suns. Orbital platforms hung like jewels around the planet, while ships moved in carefully orchestrated patterns that spoke of a civilization that had known peace and security for millennia. "Beautiful world," Harrison observed. 68 billion inhabitants, wasn't it? Remarkable architecture. Your people have clearly mastered the art of harmonious development." Kethavara's expression shifted to confusion. "How are you broadcasting from inside your system?" "Quantum entanglement is a wonderful thing, Admiral. Distance becomes irrelevant when you truly understand the fundamental forces of the universe." Harrison's smile was sharp as a blade. "But let me show you something even more interesting." New displays appeared showing weapons signatures that made the Zephyrian crew step back in alarm. Power readings that exceeded anything in their databases. Energy concentrations that violated their understanding of physics. "Those are targeting locks," Harrison explained pleasantly. "Every major city, every military installation, every government facility, every ship in your fleet. We're currently holding approximately 12,000 individual targets under quantum weapons lock. We could destroy your entire civilization with a thought." "Impossible," Kethavara breathed. No species has ever developed technology of that magnitude. You're right. No species has ever needed to. Harrison's expression hardened. But you made the mistake of targeting our children. You awakened something in humanity that you clearly don't understand. Captain Chen stepped forward, her voice carrying the cold finality of judgment. Admiral Kethavara, you are hereby charged with crimes against humanity, specifically the premeditated murder of 2,417 children. Your species is charged with genocide against 17 civilizations over the past 10,000 years. We have maintained galactic stability for silence. The word cracked like a whip. You will listen. For 10 millennia, your people have appointed themselves judges of which species deserve to survive. You have murdered billions of innocent beings based on nothing more than your own fear and prejudice. Today that ends. Admiral Harrison brought up a new display showing the quantum weapons network spanning the galaxy. Lines of force connected Earth to every system, every world, every possible target. It was a demonstration of power that made the Zephyrian technology look primitive by comparison. Every species in the galaxy is watching this transmission, Harrison continued. They're seeing the end of Zephyrian dominance and the beginning of something new. Earth is formally announcing the establishment of the Galactic Protection Protocols. Any civilization that targets civilians will face immediate and total retaliation. You cannot police the entire galaxy, Kethavara protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Can't we? Sarah smiled coldly. We have quantum surveillance monitoring every spacefaring civilization. We have weapons that can reach any target instantly, and we have something you've never possessed, the moral authority that comes from protecting innocents rather than murdering them. The transmission split again, this time showing 17 different star systems, the graveyards of the species the Zephyrians had eliminated. Dead worlds orbited cold suns, their surfaces scarred by weapons designed to ensure nothing could ever live there again. The Caridians, Harrison read from a prepared list. 7 billion souls eliminated because they developed fusion power too quickly. The Vorthak Collective, 12 billion individuals destroyed because their expansion rate exceeded Zephyrian projections. The Harmony of Singing Stars, an entire species of artists and philosophers wiped out because their music was deemed too influential on younger races. Each name hit the Zephyrian crew like a physical blow. They had never expected their victims to be remembered, their crimes to be catalogued, their actions to be held up for galactic judgment. You want to know what humanity learned from studying your methods? Sarah asked. We learned that you're not gardeners. You're cancer, a malignant growth that has been slowly killing the galaxy for 10,000 years. We offer you one chance, Harrison said formally. Complete and unconditional surrender. Your military forces will be dissolved. Your government will be disbanded. Your species will be placed under human supervision until such time as you can prove you're capable of coexisting peacefully with other sentient beings. And if we refuse? Kethavara asked, though they all knew the answer. Harrison's expression showed no emotion whatsoever. Then we will do to you what you have done to 17 other species. Except we won't target your children first. We'll give them a chance to build something better from the ashes of your civilization. The silence stretched between Earth and the Zephyrian fleet, while across the galaxy, hundreds of civilizations held their collective breath. Some were undoubtedly hoping for Zephyrian victory, fearful of what human dominance might mean. Others were celebrating the prospect of freedom from 10 millennia of oppression. You have 60 seconds to respond, Sarah announced. 59 seconds passed in absolute silence. 58, 57. At the 30-second mark, Kethavara's shoulders sagged in defeat. The reality of their situation had finally penetrated her military conditioning. They were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. They were prey, surrounded by hunters who had every reason to want them dead. She began, then stopped. 20 seconds, Harrison announced. We surrender, Kethavara said quietly. Unconditionally. We surrender. Good, Sarah replied. You will transfer your command codes to our vessels. Your ships will be impounded. Your crews will be processed as prisoners of war. And Admiral Kethavara, yes? Ambassador Zalara will be returned to your homeworld to stand trial for war crimes. We want your entire species to understand exactly what she cost you, what targeting our children cost you. As the Zephyrian ships powered down their weapons and began the humiliating process of surrender, Admiral Harrison turned to address the galaxy directly. To every civilization watching this transmission, the age of Zephyrian dominance is over. The age of human protection has begun. We will not tolerate the targeting of innocent civilians. We will not permit genocide. We will not allow the strong to prey upon the weak simply because they can. He paused, letting the implications sink in across hundreds of worlds. But unlike the Zephyrians, we will not appoint ourselves judges of which species deserve to exist. We will simply ensure that no one else makes that decision either. The galaxy belongs to all of us. It's time we started acting like it. The transmission ended and Harrison slumped slightly in his chair. The hardest part was over. The Zephyrians had been neutralized without the need for genocide, though Harrison knew many on Earth would see that as a failure of justice. "What now?" Sarah asked. Harrison looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity had just claimed responsibility for the safety of trillions of innocent beings across the galaxy. It was a burden their species had never sought, but one they would now carry forever. Now we build something better, something the children would have been proud of. 5 years after the Day of Reckoning, as historians had begun calling it, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the Memorial Garden of New Geneva. Watching her daughter play among the flowers that had been planted to honor the fallen children, little Emma, now 6 years old, laughed as she chased holographic butterflies through the air. Her innocent joy a stark contrast to the solemn monument rising behind her. 2,417 crystalline pillars stretched toward the sky, each one bearing the name, age, and photograph of a child who would never grow up. The memorial had become a pilgrimage site for humans across the galaxy, a reminder of what they fought to protect and why they could never allow such atrocity to happen again. "Mommy, why are there so many lights?" Emma asked, pointing at the pillars that glowed softly in the evening light. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "They're for children who went away before their time, sweetheart. We light them so we never forget how precious every little life is. Like me, especially like you," Sarah said, pulling Emma close. The irony wasn't lost on her that her daughter was alive only because humanity had become the most feared species in the galaxy, because they had turned their grief into strength and their rage into purpose. Admiral Harrison approached through the garden, his hair now completely gray, despite the advanced medical treatments available to senior officers. The years of galactic responsibility had aged him more than any war could have. Behind him walked an unexpected figure, Ambassador Zaylara, now bearing the simple robes of a Zephyrian penitent rather than her former diplomatic finery. "Sarah," Harrison said quietly. "She asked to speak with you." Emma looked up at the alien with curious eyes. The new generation of human children grew up knowing that the galaxy contained both wonders and horrors, both friends and enemies. They were taught to be vigilant but not hateful, strong but not cruel. "Hello," Emma said politely to Zaylara, just as her parents had taught her. The former ambassador knelt slowly, her movements showing the weight of 5 years spent in human custody, 5 years of confronting the magnitude of her crimes. "Hello, little one. You have your mother's eyes. Emma, why don't you go find Daddy?" "He's by the fountain," Sarah suggested gently. As her daughter skipped away, Sarah turned her full attention to the alien who had once represented everything evil about the galaxy. Zaylara looked different now, smaller somehow, diminished by the knowledge of what her actions had unleashed. "How are your people adjusting to their new circumstances?" Sarah asked. "With difficulty," Zaylara replied honestly. 10,000 years of believing ourselves superior to all other life does not change easily. But change we must or face extinction. It was true. The Zephyrian reconstruction had been the most ambitious undertaking in galactic history. Their entire society had been dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up, with human oversight ensuring that the cultural superiority that had led to genocide could never resurface. It was a process that would take generations, but early signs were encouraging. "The younger generation adapts more quickly," Zaylara continued. "They work alongside humans in the terraforming projects, learn your values, begin to understand what we lost when we chose fear over cooperation." Sarah nodded. The joint terraforming initiatives had been one of humanity's first major galactic projects after establishing the protection protocols. Instead of simply punishing the Zephyrians, they had put them to work rebuilding the worlds they had destroyed, giving life back to systems that had been dead for millennia. "And you?" Sarah asked. "How are you adjusting?" Sailora was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes reflecting the memorial lights. I spend my days teaching Zephyrian children about the species we eliminated. I tell them the stories of the Caridians who sang mathematics into existence, the Vorthak who built cities in the hearts of gas giants, the singing stars whose music could heal emotional trauma across species barriers. That must be difficult. It is necessary. They must understand the cost of our arrogance, the irreplaceable beauty we destroyed because we were afraid of change. Zaylara looked up at the memorial pillars. But your children, I can never undo what I did to them. I can never give back the lives I stole, the futures I erased. Sarah felt the old anger stirring. But it was different now, controlled, purposeful, channeled into something productive rather than destructive. No, you can't, but you can ensure it never happens again. Is that why you allowed me to live? To serve as an example. Partially, Sarah admitted. But also because we learned something important about justice from studying your people's methods. Genocide isn't justice, no matter how justified it might seem. It's just more death adding to the count. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as other families moved through the memorial garden. Humans, Zephyrians, and representatives of dozens of other species, all learning to coexist under humanity's protective umbrella. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still prejudices, still fear and mistrust between species that had been enemies for millennia. But children played together now across the galaxy without fear that someone would target them for being different. And that was something. The Council of Species meets next week, Harrison said, joining the conversation. The formal vote on the Galactic Constitution. Any predictions? Sarah smiled slightly. It'll pass. Not because everyone loves the idea of human leadership, but because they love the alternative even less. The Galactic Constitution was humanity's greatest diplomatic achievement, a document that established universal rights for all sentient beings while giving Earth the authority to enforce those rights. It had taken 5 years of negotiation, compromise, and occasionally the implied threat of quantum weapons. But the galaxy was finally ready to govern itself collectively, rather than allowing any single species to dominate. The protection grid is reporting normal status across all sectors. Harrison continued. No major conflicts, no species-threatening events, no targeting of civilians. For the first time in recorded galactic history, we have something approaching universal peace. At the cost of making us the most feared species in the galaxy, Sarah observed. Fear that protects innocence is preferable to love that enables atrocity, Zaylara said quietly. We Zephyrians were loved by many species who saw us as wise guides. That love blinded them to our true nature until it was too late. Emma came running back through the garden, her father close behind. Captain James Chen had returned from the Outer Rim colonies that morning, part of humanity's ongoing expansion into the galaxy. But it was a different kind of expansion now, one focused on exploration and cooperation rather than conquest and exploitation. Did you know that there are fish that swim through clouds on Kepler 438? Emma announced breathlessly. Daddy showed me pictures. Can we go see them? Maybe when you're older, Sarah laughed. It's a long way from Earth, but not too far for the quantum gates. Emma pointed out with the logic of a 6-year-old who had grown up in an age of instantaneous galactic travel. Sarah looked at her daughter and saw the future of humanity, a generation that would grow up with the galaxy as their playground, who would never know the fear of being alone among hostile stars. They would inherit the burden of protecting countless species and civilizations, but they would also inherit the tools and wisdom to do it better than their parents had. The memorial service is starting, James announced, nodding toward the central amphitheater where thousands of people were gathering. Every year on this date, the galaxy observed a moment of silence for all the children who had been lost to violence. Not just the human victims, but every innocent life taken by war, genocide, and hatred throughout galactic history. It had become the most widely observed holiday in known space. A reminder that civilization's highest duty was protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. As they walked toward the amphitheater, Zaylara fell into step beside them. She had been attending the memorial service every year since her release from prison, part of her ongoing penance for crimes that could never truly be forgiven. Sarah, she said quietly, there's something I've never told you. Something about the day we attacked your children. Sarah felt her stomach tighten, Even after 5 years, there were still details about the attack that were classified, still secrets that had never been revealed. What? We monitored your communications during the assault. We listened to the emergency broadcasts, the calls for help, Zalara's voice broke slightly. The parents searching for their children in the rubble. Sarah stopped walking, her family continuing ahead while she processed this revelation. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand that even then, in the moment of our supposed triumph, some of us knew we had made a terrible mistake. The sounds of human grief. They haunted us. They still haunt us. Zalara looked directly into Sarah's eyes. Your species' capacity for love, for protective fury, for sacrifice in defense of the innocent. We had no conceptual framework for understanding it. And now you do? Now I know that we attacked the one species in the galaxy that would never, ever forgive an assault on their children. And more importantly, the one species with the capability to ensure that such an assault could never happen again. They reached the amphitheater as the sun set behind the memorial pillars, casting long shadows across the assembled crowd. Humans and aliens stood together, children playing at their parents' feet, all united in the shared commitment to never again allow innocence to be sacrificed to political expediency. Admiral Harrison took the podium and began the traditional reading of names, not just the human children who had died 5 years ago, but representatives of every species that had been lost to genocide throughout galactic history. It would take hours to read them all, but the galaxy listened patiently, respectfully. Remembering, Sarah held Emma close as the names echoed across the memorial garden, each one a promise that such loss would never be tolerated again. Her daughter listened solemnly, too young to fully understand, but old enough to know that this was important, that these names mattered. As the ceremony continued, Sarah looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, children of 100 different species were sleeping safely because humanity had chosen to become the galaxy's guardian. It was a responsibility they had never wanted, thrust upon them by an act of unforgivable evil. But they had proven worthy of it. They had turned their grief into strength, their rage into purpose, their loss into protection for countless others. The children were gone, but their memory had become the foundation of a better galaxy. That would have to be enough. As the last name was read and silence fell over the memorial garden, Sarah whispered a promise to the stars. We remember. We protect. We never forget. The galaxy would hold her to that promise, and humanity would never let them down. In the end, Ambassador Zalara had been right about one thing. Humanity was indeed a dangerous species. But they had chosen to be dangerous to those who threatened innocence rather than to innocents themselves. It made all the difference in the galaxy.